But at length, lest the deformity and disparity of the proclamation of the tolerance in Scotland and the declaration for liberty of conscience in England should make his pretenses of conscience suspect of disingenuity, and lest it should be said he had one conscience for England and another for Scotland, therefore he added a third eke to the liberty, but such as made it still an ill-favored, patched project to destroy religion and true liberty, in another proclamation dated at Windsor, June 28, 1687, wherein he says, quote, "Taking into our royal consideration the sinistrous interpretations which either have or may be made of some restrictions mentioned in the last, we have thought fit by this further to declare that we will protect our archbishops, etc., and we do likewise by our sovereign authority, prerogative royal, and absolute power, suspend, stop, and disable all penal and sanguinary laws made against any for non-conformity to the religion established by law in that our ancient kingdom, to the end that the liberty thereby granted the peace and security of our government in the practice thereof may not be endangered. We hereby strictly charge all our loving subjects, that as we do give them leave to meet and serve God after their own way in private houses, chapels, or places purposely hired or built for that use, so that they take care that nothing be preached or taught, which may in any way tend to alienate the hearts of our people from us and our government, and that their meetings be peaceably and publicly held, and all persons freely admitted to them, and that they do signify and make known to some, one or more of the next privy councils, sheriffs, stewards, bailiffs, justices of the peace, or magistrates of burghs royal, that place or places they set apart for these uses, with the names of the preachers, provided always that the meetings be in houses and not in the open fields, for which now after this our royal grace and favor, which surpasses the hopes and equals the very wishes of the most zealously concerned, there is not the least shadow of excuse left, which meeting in the fields we do hereby strictly prohibit and forbid, against all which we do leave our laws and acts of Parliament in full force and vigor, notwithstanding the premises, and do further command all our judges, magistrates, and officers of forces to prosecute such as shall be guilty of the said field conventicles with the utmost rigor. For we are confident none will, after these liberties and freedoms, given to all without reserve to serve God in their own way, presume to meet in these assemblies, except such as make a pretense of religion to cover their treasonable designs against our royal person and the peace of our government." Unquote. This is the royal character for security of the Protestant religion, intended to secure it so that it shall not go much abroad again, in lieu of all the laws, constitutional oaths, and covenants wherewith it was formerly confirmed. This is the only patent which the royal draw ties and the modern Presbyterians, have now received to ensure their enjoyment of its durante bene placito, during this pleasure, whose faith is as absolute over all ties of promises as his power, from whence it flows, is over all laws, whose chiefest principle of conscience is that no faith is to be kept to heretics. Here is the liberty which is said to surpass the hopes and equal the wishes of the most zealously concerned, holding true indeed of too many, whose hopes and wishes and zeal are terminate upon peace rather than truth, case rather than duty, and their own things rather than the things of Christ. But as for the poor wild wanderers, it some way answers their fears and corresponds with their jealousies, who put the same interpretation upon it as on all the former indulgences, indemnities, and tolerations, proceeding from the same fountain, and designed for the same sinistrous ends with this, which they look upon as more openly and obviously anti-Christian. And therefore, while others are rejoicing under the bramble shadow of it, and think it a cause of weeping and matter of mourning, not because they do not share of the benefit of it, but because they are afraid to share of the curse of it. For which cause, though a freedom be pretended to be given to all without reserve to serve God in their own way, they think it necessary to reserve to themselves the liberty wherewith Christ hath made them free, and to serve him in his way, though interdicted by men, and to take none from Antichrist, restricted with his reserves, and to look upon it as a seasonable testimony for the cause of Christ. And the interest of the Protestant religion, and the laws and liberties of the country, all overturned and subverted by this toleration, to keep their meetings as in former times, in the open fields, whither their tyranny hath driven them, and to let them call these meetings covered and treasonable designs against the government on pretense of religion, I trust it shall be made evident to the conviction of all that know religion, that their designs are to preserve it, in opposition to the tyranny that goes about all these ways to suppress it. Though I must suspend the reasons of their keeping their meetings in the fields, till I come to discuss that case in its own place, here I shall only say, none that are acquainted with their circumstances, which are as dangerously stated as ever, by reason of the constant persecution of cruel enraged enemies, incessantly pursuing them without relenting, notwithstanding of all this pretense of clemency and tenderness of conscience, but may know that they can neither have safety, secrecy, nor conveniency in houses, for fear of their entrapping enemies. And none will blame them, that after so many discoveries of their truculent treachery, they dare not trust them, and besides, they think it sinful, scandalous, and inconvenient to seem to homologate this toleration, the wickedness whereof they are convinced of, from these reasons. Number 1. Considering the grantor in his personal capacity, as to his morals, they look upon him as a person with whom they cannot in prudence communicate in any transaction of that nature. First, because in his principles and practice professedly treacherous, yea, obliged to be both perfidious and cruel by that religion whereunto he is addicted, he cannot be trusted in the least concerns, let those be of such momentous consequence as this, without a stupid abandoning of conscience, reason, and experience. Since both that known principle and that, quote, no faith is to be kept to heretics, unquote, which is espoused by all papists, does to them justify all their lying dissimulations, equivocations, and treacheries imaginable, and that Lateran canon that enjoins kings, quote, to destroy and extirpate heretics under pain of excommunication, unquote, does oblige them to be cruel. Besides what deep engagements he is known to be under by oaths and promises to the Pope, both in his exile and while a subject, and since he came to the crown, which make him to all considering persons to be a person of that character, whose deceitful dainties are not to be desired, and that when he speaketh fair is not to be believed, for there are 7 abominations in his heart, of which open and affronted lies we have a sufficient swatch, both in his proclamation for Scotland and declaration for England, where he speaks of his constant resolves of, quote, uniting the hearts of subjects to God in religion and to their neighbors in Christian love, and that it never was his principle to offer violence to any man's conscience, or use invincible necessity against any man on the account of his persuasion, unquote. And that their property was never in any case evaded since his coming to the crown, and that it hath been his constant sense and opinion that, quote, conscience ought not to be constrained, nor people forced to matters of mere religion, unquote. To which his uninterrupted endeavors to divide us from God and from one another, that he might the more easily destroy us, and his constant encroachments upon laws, liberties, and properties, and all interests of men and Christians for conscience' sake, to give the lie manifestly. And it must be great blindness not to see, and great baseness to willingly wink at that double-faced equivocation in matters of mere religion, by which he may elude all these flattering promises of tenderness, by accepting at the most necessary and indispensable duties, if either they be such wherein any other interest is concerned besides mere religion, or if their troubles sustained thereupon be not altogether invincible necessities. Hence the plain falsehood and doubleness of his assertions as to what is past may give ground to conclude his intended perfidy in the promises of what is future. Next, it is known what his practice and plots have been for the destruction of all honest and precious interests. What a deep hand he had in the burning of London, in the Popish plot discovered in 1678, in the murder of the Earl of Essex, yea, in the parricide committed upon his own brother. By all which it appears, nothing is so abominable and barbarous which he hath not a conscience that will swallow and digest without a scruple, and what he hath done of this kind must be but preparatory to what he intends, as meritorious to atone for these villainies. And in his esteem and persuasion of papists, nothing is thought more meritorious than to extirpate the Protestant religion and destroy the professors thereof. Therefore, being such a person, with whom in reason no honest man could transact for a tenure of the least piece of land or house or any holding whatsoever, they dare not accept of his security or protection for so great an interest as the freedom and exercise of their religion under the shadow of such a bramble. If it was the Shechemites' sin and shame to strengthen a naughty Abimelech, and strengthen themselves under the shadow of his protection, much more must it be to take protection for religion as well as peace from such a monster of cruelty and treachery. This were against their testimony, and contrary to the laudable constitutions of the Church of Scotland, to take no protections from malignant enemies, as was showed above in Montrose's case. See page 107 above. Number 2, considering his religion more particularly, they judged it unlawful so to bargain with him as this acceptance would import. It is known he is not only a papist, an apostate papist, and an excommunicate papist, as is related above, but a fiery bigot in the Romish religion, and zealous, sworn votary and vassal of the Antichrist, who, as the letter from the Jesuits in Liege, lately published in print, tells us, is resolved, quote, either to convert England to popery or die a martyr, unquote. And again, that he styles himself, quote, a son of the Society of Jesuits, and will account every injury done to them to be a wrong done against himself, unquote. Being known to be under the conduct and guidance of that furious order, yea, and enrolled as a member of that society, which makes it the less to be wondered that he should require absolute obedience without reverence, seeing he himself yields absolute obedience as well as implicit faith without reserve to the Jesuits. Such a bigot was Mary of England, as also his great grand dame of Scotland, if she had got her will. And his bigotry will make him emulous of her cruelty, as counting it a diminution of his glory, for such a champion as he, under Antichrist's banner, to come short of a woman's enterprises. Nor would the late king have been so posted off the stage, if his successor were not to act more vigorously than he in this tragical design, to which this toleration is subservient. He is then a servant of Antichrist, and such, under the mediator's malediction, yea, in this respect, is heir to his grandfather's imprecations, who wished the curse of God to fall upon such of his posterity as should at any time turn papists. How then can the followers of the Lamb strike hands, be at peace, associate, confederate, or bargain with such a declared enemy of Christ? Certainly the Scripture commands of making no covenant or league, interdicting, entering into any affinity with the people of these abominations, and forbidding saying confederacy with them, do lay awful bonds on the faithful to stand aloof from such. The people might have had liberty of conscience under the Assyrian protection, when they were saying a confederacy with them, but in so doing they forfaulted the benefit of the Lord's being a sanctuary to them. To bargain, therefore, with such an one for a toleration of religion were contrary to the Scriptures, contrary to the covenants and principles of the Church of Scotland, against associations and confederations with such enemies. See Gillespie's useful Case of Conscience concerning associations, hinted, page 109, and more, head 3, argument 1. But to accept of this liberty as now offered were a bargaining, for where there is a giving and receiving upon certain conditions, where there are demands and compliance, commands and obedience, promises and reliance, offers upon terms and acquiescence in these terms, what is there wanting to a bargain but the mere formality of subscriptions? At least it cannot be denied, but the addressers have bargained for it, and in the name of all the acceptors, which must stand as their deed also, if they do not evidence their resentment of such presumption, which I do not see how they can if they abide under the shadow thereof the same way as they do. I grant liberty is very desirable, and may be taken and improved from enemies of religion, and so do the wanderers now take it and improve it to the best advantage, without receiving it by acquiescing in any terms. But such a liberty as this was never offered without a destructive design, nor ever received without a destructive effect. It is one of the filthy flatteries found in the English addresses, particularly that from Totnes, that the present indulger is like another Cyrus, who proclaimed liberty to the people of God, Ezra 1, but who sees not the disparity in every respect.